You scroll through hundreds of job descriptions, but they all sound the same. You spend so much time on every application, but it doesn't seem to matter. You send off application after application, but never hear back. You thought the interview went so well, but it's a no. You jump through all the hoops. The news keeps saying how there are all these employers that are struggling to find people to hire. So why does finding a great job have to be so hard? It doesn't seem very logical or fair. It's not. The system is broken. It's not your fault. The process most people go through to get a job is awful. But here's the good news. The system isn't very smart. In fact, it's downright dumb. It can be beaten. How? Most prospective employers and employees today are using the same old tired strategies that have been around forever. It's like professional camouflage. Everybody just blends into the crowd. But you don't have to be that way anymore. You can get traction. You can stand out from the crowd to unleash your God-given potential, to help a world in need, to do work that matters, to earn what you and your family deserve. You can do this. You're meant to do this. There are bright things on the horizon for you. This is the way. Hello, my friends. My name is Eric Woodard. I'm a high-performance career coach out of Washington, D.C. And if you're here to get hired fast without settling, getting ignored, or losing hope, my friends, you are in the right place. And I'm so glad you're here. I know we've got people joining us from all over. So if you would, in the chat, put where you're from and how long you've been on the job search. And I know we've still got some people coming in and there's a little bit of delay in the chat. So we'll get started right now. And so glad to have you all here. I know your time is valuable. So just really want to honor you for taking the time to be here today. So look, my friends, if you are somebody who has been on a job search, you know firsthand that being on a job search can feel a lot like pounding sand. Hey there, Ted from Indiana. Nice to see you. It can feel like pounding sand. It can feel a lot like, like waiting on a glacier. It can feel like being lost at sea. Hey there, Russ from California. Nice to see you. It can feel like wandering through the desert. Nice to see you there, John from Plymouth and Daniel from Denver. Hi, David from Silicon Valley. It can feel a lot like going into the arena or like staring into an abyss, right? So who is this for? If you are unsure about the direction you want your career to go, if you've been struggling to find ways to describe what you do, if you're uncertain if your resume is any good, if you've been wrestling with how to follow up after you apply, if you're tired of applying and then hearing nothing back, I really hear you on that. If you've done interviews that seem to be great and you get the no, especially if you've got, you're down to 2 and you're the one that gets the no, there's nothing harder than that. If you feel trapped in a job you don't like, but you're not sure, how to get out of it, especially if you're losing hope, this could really be for you. Hey there, Lauren. Lauren Russell. Nice to see you there. 2 years looking. I hear you there, Lauren. All right. So who's this not for? If you're super casual about your career, if you're not willing to do the work, if you're sort of reluctant to take responsibility for the results you've been getting, if you're really just interested in finding a job to make money, if you're sort of stuck in your ways and closed-minded and you sort of know a lot, right? Sometimes I run into job seekers and they know a lot about why they're not getting a job. It's something to pay attention to. If you're unwilling to be authentic, this may not be up your alley, my friends. What you'll learn, we're going to talk about how to get hired fast without settling, getting in order to losing hope. I'm going to offer you 3 strategies and 8 tactics that you can put to work today and finally do what work that matters and pays what you and your family deserve. So our agenda for today, so I'm going to talk just a little bit, just to give you a sense of where I'm coming from. So maybe I know what I'm talking about, and who knows, I could be wrong about all of it. I'm going to give you 3 strategies, 8 tactics. I've got an invitation for you for those of you who want to wind up talking to me. That'll be an invitation, and we're going to take questions. And we've got sometimes I do this workshop, guys, and we've got a big group. We don't have such a huge group today because I just did this workshop week before last. So it's not a huge group, which means that if you have questions, this is a time to ask. I see you there, Mike. What about being on the older side with great experience? All right, Mike, if I forget, we're going to come back to that. Because that's a great question. So let's get started. And just like Mike's showing us the example here, feel free as we go to put things in the chat. And I'll ask you questions in the chat too. And there's a little bit of a delay though between the time I ask and the time you guys I see them. So we're going to do our best. So who is this guy and why does he think he can help me find a job? So look, guys, I actually, I'm here in the States now. I grew up overseas. I came to the States when I was 17 to attend college, and I had a really hard time, right? I had tried a hard time fitting in. I wound up transferring college 7 times before I finally got out of it. And by the time I was done, I wound up as a scuba instructor on Guam. That was pretty good. I spent a lot of hours underwater with the fish, and it was beautiful. And I did that for about 3 years. And eventually my brain got a little bit spongy and I thought, man, I got to like pull it together. So I thought, what would be the most prestigious job I could have? The coolest job. And I was a scuba instructor on Guam. That's pretty cool. But like, what would be the coolest job? And I figured that must be something like the White House. So I took out a piece of paper and I wrote the world's worst cover letter and I mailed that into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I figured, I'm never hearing from those guys. But about a month later, I was riding my bike past the Guam post office and they came out. They said, Eric, you got a letter from the White House. And I opened it and it was cool. It was like on this White House envelope and White House stationery. And I opened it up and it was an internship application. And I didn't know what the hell an internship was, but I was really good at filling out applications because I transferred so many times. So I sent that in. I was like, I'm never hearing back from those guys. But that got me thinking. I applied to some grad schools and got into one at GW. And I wound up landing in DC with like a bushy haircut and with a backpack and was dumpster diving for furniture. But I was out running past the National Mall and ran past the White House. I was like, those White House bastards, they never even bothered to let me know about that internship thing. So I found a payphone. I put in a quarter. I said, hey, you White House bastards, what about that internship thing? And they're like, is this Eric from Guam? I'm like, yeah, but I'm in DC now. They're like, man, you're supposed to start in the First Lady's office on Monday. So I bought a pair of shoes and bought a suit and got a haircut and I showed up. And I don't know if your politics match mine. This is going to age me here. This is back during the Clinton administration. So I went to work for the First Lady, who was Hillary Clinton, and she was a great boss. And I wound up getting hired on her staff in Hillary Land. And that was a great experience. And I followed her to the Senate and I followed her to the State Department. And I eventually later wound up as director of internships and fellowships at the Smithsonian. And all during this time, both, as an early professional and as somebody who's a mid-level professional and somebody who helps a lot of people with job stuff, I saw some of these same patterns. Professionals of all kinds, all ages, all stages, all industries run into some of the same things. So now I coach and I've love it. I've written a bunch of books about job stuff. I've got all sorts of fancy degrees and certifications on job stuff. I've got all these stellar reviews from all these people saying how wonderful I am. And you don't care about any of that because the question you're asking is, can this guy help me get a job? I don't know. Maybe, probably. Let's find out. So here are 3 strategies that you can put to work in your job search today. So my encouragement for you is, and for those of you watching the replay, thanks for watching the replay. And for those of you who are live, you'll get to ask questions. Feel free to ask that. And Mike, I see a couple from you. Thanks for playing, Mike. I appreciate that. Feel free to enter stuff in the chat and write some stuff down, folks, because I predict that some of the things I'm about to offer to you are different than what you may have been hearing. And you know firsthand that probably a lot of the stuff you've been doing doesn't work so well. So maybe this will. We'll see. So put it in the chat here. Who can tell me what a good resume is about? All right. We got a tight little group here today. So everybody participate. Who can tell me what a good resume is about? Put it in the chat, if you would, please. All right. Put it in the chat. What's a good resume about? I'm curious to know what you will say. What's a good resume about? Put it in the chat. We'll give you guys just a couple of seconds because I know there's a delay. Okay, there we go. So Ted says it's about accomplishments. Hey there, Ted. right? Any other takers? What's a good resume about? Skills. Thank you again, Ted, right? So a lot of people will say that, okay, passes the ATS, Russ says. Okay, we're going to talk about that. So Fred says it's positioning you, accomplishments. I haven't seen the right answer yet. Skills and personality. I have not seen the right answer. Okay, so a lot of people think a good resume is about you, right? A good resume is about like you, right, as the job seeker, and that would be incorrect. Because anytime you want to be influential with another human being, there's one thing you want to talk about, and that's them, right? A good resume, my friends, is not about you. A good resume is about them. And it's actually not even about your accomplishments and your personality. The only purpose, because there's one reason they're going to hire you. There's one reason anybody's going to hire you. And it's not your skills. It's not your experience. It's not you selling yourself. None of that. The reason they're going to hire you is because they trust you. They trust that you can understand, that you can see, hear, and understand what they care about and help them reach their goals. That's it, right? If you can accomplish that, you will beat out all of your competition and you'll have people beating a path to your door, right? This is about trust. So this is strategy number one. A lot of people think, oh, a good resume is about you. It's not, it's about them, right? Employers are focused on themselves. And like, look, there's good, there's organizations out there that care about their employees, right? Google gives people free lunch, or at least they used to. I think they still do, right? But the purpose of Google is not to feed its staff. The purpose of Google is to make good Google. And when they feed their staff to stay later, that's a means to an end. So realize that it's not about you. It's about the constituent, the client, the customer, the board, or the stock shareholder, right? It's not about you. And those of you who are seasoned professionals know this. It's interesting that a lot of times in the context of a job search, we forget this because often our first job search was coming out of school. And in school, it very much is about us, right? It's our cubby, it's our desk, it's our report card, it's our trophy, it's our grade, it's our diploma. And yet when we move to the working world, it's not about us anymore. It's about them. So this is a fundamental shift. If you can get nothing else from this workshop today, if you can get that it's about them, not you, you'll be doing fine. All right. Make the application about them. Okay. So these are books. And a lot of times we'll put these in a library, right? Lots of books on shelves in a library. So these are storybooks. So I'm curious in the chat. We had a shelf full of storybooks, and there were words on the front cover of these storybooks. What do we call the words on the front cover of these storybooks? Put it in the chat. What do we call those words on the front cover of a storybook? What are those words called? I know there's a little bit of a delay here. So I need some like Jeopardy music or something to go, na, 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 na. But there we go. Daniel's got it. Title. There we go. Thank you, John. Title, right? So the words that we put on the front, thanks, Ted, Russ. The words we put on, thank you, Sergey. The words we put on the front cover of a storybook are called titles. There you go, Lauren Russell, right? Now, isn't it interesting that that's the same term we use to label people in the workplace, which tells me that titles in the workplace are really just putting, thanks, Francois, right? Missed you the other day, by the way. It's really just the title that we put on the story of our career, right? So, and just like we can tell a story about that's in a book, we can tell the story about our career. So this brings us to strategy number 2, right? Strategy number 1 is you want to make it about them. Strategy 2, you want to tell stories, lots of stories. And, so many times job seekers, there's this thing about, we're data driven. Put this in the chat one more time. What is the ratio when people make decisions? What percent is emotional and what percent is logical? Okay. So what's the ratio of emotion to logic in the chat? Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? Like emotion to logic. When people make decisions, what percent is emotional and what percent is logical? Let's see if anybody can get the right answer. I see you there, Daniel. Anybody? Okay, so Fred, Ted, good. There you go, John. Says 80. I see a lot of 80-20s, 90-10. Sergey says 70-30. Excellent. Okay, so here's the thing. Daniel got it right. Daniel's right. It's when we make decisions, it's 100% emotional. And the reason way we know this is when people get the part of their brain damage that is the limbic system, they're fine. They can't have emotions, so they're fine, except they can't make a single decision. And that's the debilitating aspect of it. So decisions are made 100% emotionally. Now, we might rationalize those decisions based on logic, but the original decision is 100% emotional. So, sure, put some data in your resume, that's fine. But if I was to ask you your phone number on your fifth birthday, I always get in trouble for this, by the way. If I was to ask them what your phone number was on your fifth birthday, you might not know. But if I was to ask you how you felt on your fifth birthday, there's a good chance you would know. Now, I always get people saying, I remember. Okay, fine, I believe you, right? But our capacity to remember emotion is so much greater than it is to remember facts. And the way we communicate emotion is through story. It's not through numbers. So if you're not using story in your resume, it's a real opportunity. And when I say resume, it's your interviews, it's your networking, it's your follow-up, all of it, right? Stories are really, really important. Make sure your application has stories. Titles are just a story. So, perfect example. One time I was receiving applications. This was for an internship program. This was a long time ago. And one of the applicants mentioned how she had been in a terrible car crash the summer before, and her arm had been severed. It's like, that's terrible. I felt bad. So I was like, wow, boy, that's quite a story. So we accepted her and she was coming in. I was, ready for her to walk in with one arm. And I was making sure, I was thinking about accessibility stuff and all the rest. She walks in the first day, two arms. Now, was I upset? Of course not. I was so glad she had both her arms, and it had a bandage on it from where it had been partially severed and reattached, and she was getting her feeling back. What a story. I remember that to this day. There's probably not a lot else I can remember for that time, right? So stories are powerful. You want to be memorable? You want to stand out? Tell stories, my friend. Okay, so put in the chat, who is this guy? What is this guy's name? Who knows? We're going to put it in the chat. I'll give you a hint. He's voting for Pedro, right? What is this guy's name called? What is this guy? What is, and he's fan of Ligers. It would be another thank you, Mark Anderson. I don't know that that's right, Dad. Right? What is this guy called? Thank you, Daniel. Okay, so this guy is I think that's the actor, right? Napoleon Dynamite. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this movie, so I don't want to give away the story. First of all, go see the movie, obviously. But the story behind this is Napoleon's a high school kid, and he sort of beats to his own drum. And there's this one particular scene where he's on stage in front of all of the student body, and he has to do this dance routine, which he hasn't really practiced, but he's got the right music playing. Yeah, he's a hero. That's right. And he just lets it loose, right? I mean, he lets it loose. It's the craziest damn thing you've ever seen. And when it's done, the students in the audience are silent, right? There you go, Tots. I love that, right? They're silent. And then there's uproarious applause, and people love it. And the reason it works, the reason people love it, is because it's so authentic. And that brings us to our third strategy. Jamie Kern Lima, the founder of It Cosmetics, says everybody's a good dancer if they commit fully. And she's right. So authenticity, right? The reason people are going to hire you is because they trust you. And that means, and the reason they're going to trust you is because of who you are, not despite it. It's never the scandal. It's always the cover up. Okay. So many try and be perfect. I am proficient in Microsoft Office. Yes. Stop that. Right. If you know Office, that's fine. But if you don't say proficient in real life, stop doing that. Right. It's fake. Humans hire humans. And I saw earlier, I can't remember who it was. I'm scrolling back here. Somebody mentioned ATS, right? Which some of you guys know if you've heard about algorithms or things like that. Yeah, guys, I'm skeptical because I've talked to a lot of people, and every organization uses different software, and that's just a way for, basically HR people to sort of sort out the applications they have coming. But if you've been spending a lot of time trying to bow down at the altar of some sort of algorithm, stop. Computers don't hire humans. Computers don't hire computers, and humans don't hire computers. Humans hire humans. All right. So the opportunity for you is to be more human, not less human, right? And that's your authenticity, right? You want to give them evidence that you are a human, just like Napoleon Dynamite, very human, not a computer. You right? The reason they're going to hire you is because they trust you. And the way The way we trust people is through vulnerability and relatability. It's not by being perfect and sort of like trying to please a computer somewhere. That may happen someday, but at least for now, we have thumbs, right? Like we have thumbs. We win. The Terminator's not here yet. Okay. The Matrix. So perfect example. I'll tell you the story here of Nina. Notice how I'm telling stories, right? So Nina was a client I worked with, and she was I was working with her, and we're going through her resume and stuff. And so I was like, Nina, what do you like to do for fun? And she's like, well, I have a pen collection. I'm like, well, that's super weird. Put that on there. She's like, oh no, I couldn't do that. That's unprofessional. So I go back and forth with Nina for like 30 minutes. Finally, I convince her to show that she's a human. Put on there that she collects pens. That's super weird. Put it on there, right? So I get a call from her about a month later. She calls. She says, Eric, I want to thank you because I went in for the interview. We talked about pens for 30 minutes, and then they offered me the job. Okay, so if you don't have stuff on your resume giving evidence that you're a human, talking about the things that make you you, it's an opportunity. Nobody can be a better version of you than you. And that's the reason they're going to hire you, my friends. So if you don't have that on there, I would put it on there. Authenticity is your superpower. Mike says, isn't AI filtering the resumes so you can't get through that and then no interview? No, Mike, there's no AI filter. I mean, there's going to be some organizations that use it to sort resumes, but like there's an algorithm somewhere that's making these decisions. And let's suppose there is, by the way, right? Are we just going to like apply and be like, I hope we hear back? You guys are following up on your applications, right? If you're not, it's an opportunity, right? We're going to talk more about this. Okay. We're going to talk more about this. It's a great question, Mike. I appreciate it. Okay. So how do you put this all to work? Okay, so we're going to talk about 8 tactics, and here we go. Buckle up. If you're not writing stuff down, please do. Here we go. So look, it's hard to hit a blurry target, my friends, right? It's hard to hit a blurry target. And what that brings us to is clarity, right? You want to have clarity. So often I'll talk to potential, job seekers, and I'll ask them things like, well, what do you want to do? And they're like, well, I want to make the world a better place. I'm like, that's beautiful. And it's super vague. Like, how much money do you want to make? Well, anywhere over 100,000. That's fantastic. And again, like there's a lot of numbers above 100,000, right? Like there's a great Bruce Lee quote where he says, be careful what you say to yourself because your brain is listening. This has to do with a thing called the reticular activating system, where you go to buy a new car and you're like, nobody's got this car. I'm going to be the only one in town with this car. And as you drive it off a lot, now you see the car 3 times. Right? Those of you who are watching this, either the replay or live, if right now I was to say, look around the room for something red. Look around the room for something red. I bet some of you are seeing red things that you weren't paying attention to before. That's because we've asked your brain to notice the red things. So if you don't have clarity around what you're looking for, you will literally be blind to it. So you want to get really clear on what you're looking for. Right? You want to get clarity around your salary, your occupation, your goals, and you don't want to be wide open, because if you're everything, that means you're nothing, right? Specificity and clarity is vital. All right. So there's a reason when NASCAR drivers drive a car 500 miles in a circle that they don't look at the outer wall, because the car will tend to go where their eyes go. And it's the same thing with your job search. If you have clarity around what you're looking for, you'll see it. You want to have the map before you go into the forest. All right. Okay. Now this is something for the chat. If I went and bought this thing, put it in the chat. What am I buying? If I went and bought this thing, what would I be buying? Put it in the chat. If I went out and I bought this, what am I buying? What would I be buying? I might buy it at Home Depot. I might buy it at Lowe's. But what would I be buying if I bought this? Put it in the chat if you would, please. Oh, Fred. Look at Fred. Okay. So John says a drill, a screwdriver. Cordless. Yep. Russ. Good. Good. Okay. Sergey says a drill. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Electric screwdriver. Francois. Okay. Great. 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 So Fred, I got to give you credit. Right now, Fred has the most correct answer, because nobody actually needs this laying around the garage. Right? Nobody needs this. What you're actually buying is you're buying a hole. And Fred, I'm going to actually challenge you in a real loving way here. You're not actually buying a hole. although I appreciate your answer, right? You're not buying whole. What you're buying is a place to put the hook. And nobody needs a hook sticking out of your wall. What you're actually buying is a place to hang the photo. Nobody actually needs a photo. What you're actually buying is the feeling you get when you look at the photo of your family that's hanging on the hook, that's in the hole that was made by the drill. Okay. So very often job seekers aren't thinking about the employer at all. And the few that are might be saying, oh, you need a drill. But what they really want is the feeling they get when they look at their family that's in the picture, that's on the hook, that's in the wall, that's in the hole, right? That's what we're after. So you want to get clear about your narratives. If you can get clear around what that employer thinks about when they stare up at the ceiling at night, game over, right? And that can take some slowing down to get to really understand what employers want. Because what we're after here, my friends, is to give that employer safety. What we're after here is to make them feel seen, heard, and understood. And if you can do that, you don't have to worry about your competitors. Most people are out there trying to sell themselves, right? They're trying to look good. Stop it. Stop doing that, right? The opportunity is to go there and make that employer feel seen, heard, and understood so they feel safe, so they trust you. All right. What do they stay up at night looking at the ceiling, thinking about? How can you make them feel seen, heard, and understood? All right. We're doing great. We're moving on to narrative or tactic number 3. So this here is my resume or a version of one of my resumes, right? It's sort of like the kitchen sink, which brings us to tactic number 3, paper, right? You want your paper dialed in. And there's a really important distinction here. You don't want your resumes and your cover letters and the paper you send in to look like everybody else's. So like best practices, no, right? You want to look like the exception, which means there are things you can do with the paper you send that make you stand out. Notice, for instance, in my resume, I've got hyperlinks. Why don't you have hyperlinks in your resume if you don't already? Those of you that do, congratulations, right? Now, it's not like they're going to go and click those hyperlinks and, necessarily they might, but it shows them that you're somebody who can think four-dimensionally, right? People are going to believe what you show them much more than what you tell them, right? So, right? So many people look for, they want their, like, what's the best practice? How do I make myself look like everybody else, right? It's professional camouflage. Realize that the paper you send is really just a communication piece, and it matters how you send it, to whom you send it, when you send it, where you send it, like all that matters. And style actually matters much as substance, because people are going to believe what you show them more than what you tell them, right? You want to communicate with them in a way they cannot ignore, right? So examples, hyperlinks, great. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit before, right? If an application is submitted but there is no follow-up, does it even make a sound? I would humbly suggest it doesn't, which brings us to tactic number 4. When you apply, follow up. There's a guy named Ryan Serhant who wrote a book called Sell It Like Serhant. He's a big real estate agent in New York City. He writes in his book, I've never seen the TV show. My wife says he's kind of mean in the TV show, but he writes a great book. So I don't know. But he tells a story in the book about how he really prides himself about being responsive on email, except when people apply to work for his firm. So invariably somebody interviews with his firm and they send a thank you note. Ryan doesn't reply. He ignores it because he's waiting to see, are they going to show him that they can take initiative? So if they send a second message, he sends something back really discouraging. So like, man, fuck off. Like it's really discouraging. And it's not until they email him a third time that he's like, okay, why don't you come in and let's talk? My Jewish friends tell me that there's the same tradition. I'm not Jewish, but if I wanted to become Jewish and I went to a rabbi and knocked on her door and said, hey, rabbi, I want to become Jewish, she would say, no, you can't do it. This path is too hard. Go away. I'd have to knock again. She'd say, no, you can't do it. It's not until I knock the third time that she might say, okay, come in, let's talk. So follow up. People are going to believe what you show them more than what you tell them. You can say, oh, I can take initiative and I know how to be a problem solver, or you could just show them. What do you think is more powerful, right? So a lot of people think, ooh, but Eric, isn't that pushy? We're going to talk about that in a second. What we're after here is not aggressive. What we're after here is assertive. All right. Initiative is rewarded. Show them rather than tell them. Another example, Darren Hardy, who's the publisher of Success Magazine. He's somebody I follow. He tells a story, or former publisher. He tells a story about when he used to be a realtor, And apparently when somebody has a contract with a realtor and that contract expires, so they're basically trying to sell their house and they need a new realtor, like all the realtors in town know it. And they might give them a call around 9 or 10. What Darren would do is he'd show up at their house, 6 a.m., full suit with paperwork, knock on the door. They'd sort of sleepily open the door and they'd be like, who the hell are you? Like, oh, I'm Darren. I'm your new realtor. Right. And if they didn't sign right then, around midday, he would send them like a gift basket, like a really heavy gift basket. And then around 2 in the morning, he might, or 2 in the afternoon rather, he would have an associate show up with a sale sign that said, hey, you're going to need this sold sign. Right. And he said he lost about 1 out of 5 for being too much, but he got the other 4 because people were like, look, if you work as hard to sell my house as you did to get my business, like that's going to make a difference. So Russ says, how do I follow up with an application on an HR site? Good question, Russ. Right? So there's a number of ways. So let's say you want to follow up. Like there's a lot of ways. You could find somebody that works there on LinkedIn, right? You could find their email address. You can make a guess. Sometimes I ask the challenging question when people ask me this question, but I don't have the email address. If the person you loved most in the world, life depended on it, depended on you finding somebody's email address at any company in the world, and I gave you 8 hours to do it, could you do it? Of course you could, right? So it's not a perfect science, Russ, and this is one of the things I talk about in my program when I work with clients, right? Is how to follow up. There's actually a lot of different ways. You can email them, you can go through LinkedIn, you can go through a contact, it's not impossible, and you don't actually need to have the right person, because if we're in the workplace and I get a message from somebody who's a job seeker and I'm not the hiring manager, what am I instantly going to do with that message? Some of you are like, delete it. No, they're not going to delete it. What are they going to do? They're going to forward it to the right person, right? If I'm a CEO and I get a message from somebody and the message is not, by the way, hey, I just applied and I wanted to check in, stop doing that, because who's that about? It's about you, right? We're going to follow up in a way that makes the employer feel seen, heard, and understood. And look, the CEO, she's sitting there all day. All she gets is complaints all day. So when she gets a message from somebody she doesn't know that says, hey, I want to acknowledge what you're doing, that's going to stand out. And her first question might be like, who the hell is this person? And then there's an opportunity to be like, oh, thanks for asking. I recently applied to your whatever position. That gets forwarded to the head of HR and we're off to the races. I don't know if that happens every time, but those of you who've been in the workplace know stuff like that happens all the time. And that and more is available to you. So, okay, now folks, if you haven't been paying attention to this workshop, or if you've been watching the replay and you've sort of been like making guacamole or something, right? Pay attention, come back to me, because this is the most valuable thing I can offer you today. Okay, we're going to put this in a chat. Let's say there is a lake, and in the middle of the lake, someone's drowning, and they're surrounded by other people in little boats. So somebody's in the middle of the lake drowning, and they're surrounded by other people in little boats. If that was a job search, who's the person drowning? Put it in the chat. Okay, so this is a metaphor. There's somebody in the middle of the lake drowning, and they're surrounded by other people in little boats. If that was a job search, who's the person drowning? They're out there, they're splashing around, right? Meanwhile, the people in the boats are just rowing around. So Ted says, that's me, okay? Who's the person drowning in a job search, right? Who's the person drowning? Any other takers? Thanks for being brave, Ted. Right? If that's a job search and there's a person drowning surrounded by other people in little boats, Francois says self. Got it. Okay. So here's the thing, Ted, Francois, I love you and you're wrong. Right? A lot of people think when I'm on a job hunt that I'm the one drowning because it feels that way. Maybe you have bills to pay, you have, family and friends and spouses and kids and whoever that are putting pressure on you. Like, you're not the one drowning. They're the one drowning. And the reason we know they're the ones drowning is they've told us. They put up a job description and they said, help, we're drowning. We've got too much work to do. Meanwhile, the people in the boats are the other applicants. Now, some of the applicants will act like they're drowning and they'll row up and they'll say, oh my God, let me help you. I'm the one, I'm the best. And the person in the water will be like, get the hell away from me, right? Needy is creepy, right? Or maybe they'll even hit them on the head and they'll drown, right? It's very sad. Where others will row up and say, hey, you're drowning. That's terrible. That must be so scary for you. Sorry that's happening to you. Just so you know, I've rescued a lot of people. Are you looking for help? because I have no idea if I'm the right person to pull your ass out of the water. How could I know that? I don't know anything about you. I just know you're drowning. But what's important here is not that I'm the right one to rescue. What's important is you don't drown and die. My friends, that is the energy and the mindset you want to bring to your job search. Because what we're doing here is we're giving potential employers safety. If we act like we're the ones drowning, employers are going to smell it and they're going to be like, wow, that person seems really great, but they don't make me feel safe. And that's what we want to give employers. We want to let them know that, hey, I'm a safe choice. You can trust me. Right? That's what we're after. And if we don't trust ourselves, it's hard for others to trust us. All right. Thanks for those comments, Francois. All right. So most people are like, I hope they pick me. I hope they pick me. I want to look good. Stop doing that. What they think of you is none of your business. Right. And instead of looking at jobs thinking, ooh, which of these jobs would I like? My invitation to you is look at jobs and ask the question, who can I help? Right? Because they would be lucky to get you. There's plenty of jobs out there, but there's only one of you. You need a job, but you don't need that job. You need money, but you don't need their money. That is the mindset. What we're not after here is arrogant or aggressive. What we're after here is assertive, right? You want to come from a place of service. Nobody wants to be sold, right? So, sometimes I hear people say, "Oh, I want to sell myself." Stop doing that, right? Selling people is weird, right? We've gone over this historically, right? And anybody that wants to buy a person, that's icky, right? That's creepy. So this isn't about selling yourself. What you're selling is possibility for them. If you can get dialed in on that, it is a real game changer. Okay. So I know this is the wrong kind of crab, right? But those of you who've seen the show Deadliest Catch, right? There's fishermen in Alaska and it's this pitching deck and it's often really icy. They have these big steel cages called crab pots. And they what they do is they set them on the bottom of the ocean floor with a little bit of bait. And all of a sudden, a crab will come along. Let's say it's Bob the crab, and Bob says, "Oh, there's some bait." So Bob goes in and starts nibbling. And his buddy Charlie sees him and said, "Look at Bob. Bob's got free lunch." So he goes in there, and eventually more and more crabs join because the way crabs think, crabs like to be with other crabs because it's safer. And to the extent that if one of the crabs says, "Look, the bait's gone. There's no more lunch in here. I'm out of here." The other crabs will pull them back in, even pulling off one of their arms or even doing a crab murder. They'll even kill a crab to keep him in there, right? And of course, at the end of the day, when all those crabs are in there and they won't let each other escape, they all become dinner. It's the worst thing ever, which brings us to topic number 6, and that's environment, right? You want to make sure that your environment is dialed in. And what I'm talking about mostly is your social environment. So if you're with people who are saying, "Ooh, you should really settle," or, toxic kind of people, you got to get that handled because your environment means everything. Some of you have heard about reference groups, right? You're the average weight, income, education, whatever of the 5 people you hang out with the most. That is true. And these don't have to be living people. These can be authors you read that died 100 years ago. It can be the news you watch, the TV you watch. Whatever is influencing your environment, you want to get handled, to optimize it, because that's going to really help you succeed in a job search. Most people don't even consider it, and it has a huge impact, right? You want to be intentional. You want to safeguard it. You want to have good boundaries. Okay, we talked about reference groups. All right, we're on to tactic number 7. We are moving along. You guys are doing great. Thanks for sticking with me here. So let's talk about interviews. Would you guys like to know the best interview advice in the world? Right? Would you like to know the best interview advice? Here it is. Don't answer their questions. Stop doing that. Because those of you who've given interviews know that nobody's really, and look, interviews are weird. There's these contrived situations where strangers kind of go into a room and one stranger judges another, and there's nothing organic about these situations. I mean, interviews are just weird. And those of you who have given interviews like I have probably know firsthand that you're not really asking questions to get information, right? The questions you ask are on the interview. You're not really, what you're trying to do is get a sense of the person, because basically what you're asking is, can I trust them? Right? If I hire this person, can I trust that they're not going to make my life miserable and that my boss isn't going to get mad at me for making a bad hire? And maybe I'll be able to take that vacation. That's what they're thinking about. Okay. So if they're not really trying to get information, you might as well use their questions as an excuse to give answers and tell stories that are of service to them. And if you do that, it makes everything so much easier. And so by having that strategy, or tactic, I guess, you don't really have to worry about the questions you ask, because whatever they ask, you're just going to use those questions as an excuse to give the answers and stories that you're already prepared to tell. Very, very powerful. All right. So don't focus on the questions, focus on your answers, right? Because at the end of the day, they're really just making mouth noise to get you to make mouth noise so they can judge your mouth noise. So you might as well make mouth noise that's of service to them. All right, guys, final tactic number 8, offers, right? What I see a lot of times when I talk to job seekers is I'll say, how are the applications going? And sometimes I'll hear people say, oh, well, Eric, you got to understand, I'm really particular about the applications I send. And I'm like, why? What's your thinking on that? Right? And they're like, oh, well, if I apply and I get the job, then I'll have to take it. Then my family has to move to Arizona and blah, 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 blah. Realize that you don't want to bottleneck yourself at the application stage, right? Because you don't even have to worry if you're qualified for a job to apply. And you don't have to worry if you want it. They'll decide if you're qualified, and you don't have to decide if you want a job unless and until you get the offer. Now, look, if there's some job you clearly would never accept, don't spend your time and energy applying there. But you can be a lot more liberal in terms of your applications, and you just be in the world of not knowing, because as soon as we know, oh, I would never like that job, that's where possibility goes to die, as opposed to curiosity. I wonder what that job would be like. Send in an application, see what happens. Right? The only thing it's costing you is the time it puts together the application. If you have a good system for that, it's not that much time. The time it takes to follow up, and if you have a system for that, that follow up doesn't take that much time. And the networking around it. Again, if you have a system for that, it doesn't take that much, right? And so therefore, you've just got a lot more. You're just planting a lot more seeds, and some of them are going to sprout, and then you can decide whether you want to harvest them or not. You don't have to. It's a phone call, right? So don't worry about whether you want a job until you get an offer. Apply from a place of service. You might like a job by accident or vice versa. You never know. Great job, guys. Okay, so write this down. These are the things we talked about today, right? You want to have the right mindset. You want to dial in the paper. You want to have good follow-up. You want to have your networking game on target, and you want to have systems around that. Same thing with the interview, right? When you go into an interview, you don't want to be obsessed about the questions you ask. You want to be obsessed about the answers you give and the stories you tell from a place of service. And there's a way to think about offers. So look, my friends, some of you are going to have watched this interview, and I appreciate everybody here who's live. Some of you are seeing the replay, and you're going to be like, you know what? This is beautiful. I'm going to take these strategies and run. God bless, right? Especially those of you who haven't been job searching that long. It could be that, try doing it on your own. Others of you who are going to be like, this sounds different. Like, this sounds different from other stuff I've been hearing. And maybe you've been working to do it on your own for a while and you haven't gotten traction. And so you're looking to do something different to get different results. And if that's you, I want to invite you to have a conversation with me, because I have a program. It's called Get Hired Fast. It's awesome. And if you'd be interested in hearing more about it, I just put in the chat the link to book a call with me. I know I've got a little bit of time tomorrow, and I got a little bit of time tomorrow and some time next week. We could have a conversation about what's possible for you. It's not a program I do for free, guys. I charge people $3,000 for it, and people get miracles from it. And especially people who've been on the job search for a long time, who've been doing the same things, getting the same results, they get new results. I will say, whatever results you're getting right now in your job search is perfectly attuned to your current system. Right? I'll say that again. Whatever results you've been getting right now in your job search is perfectly attuned to your current system. So those of you who want different results, adopt a different system. And those of you who are, one calculation to make is what's your opportunity cost here? So if you're, wanting to make 120 grand a year, that's like, 10 grand a month, which works out to, $2,500 a week, which means that if by making an investment in yourself, if you got hired a week sooner, like, the program would pay for itself just about, right? So that's a way to think about this. And I know a lot of people in job searches, because I talk to a lot of you, are really into affordability. They're like, oh, these dollars are my last dollars. I have to treat money like oxygen. And I just encourage, my question for you is, how's that going? Right? Because action is what's powerful here. So anyhow, that's the link. And for those of you who watch the replay, it's going to be somewhere around this video. You're welcome to book a call with me. I'd be so glad to talk to you to see what's possible for you. And I know there's a ton of questions that I skipped over. So let's go back to those questions. Let's make my head gigantic here. There, now you've got full giant Eric head. And so there's a bunch of questions here. I'm going to go back. And if you have new questions, please put them in. Okay, so here we've got, thanks, Mike, for playing along here. So are candidates being more direct in interviews than before? And is that okay? So presumably, Mike, are they being more direct than they were like 10 years ago or 50 years ago? I'm not sure, but what I will say, it goes back to what I was saying about it's never the scandal, it's always the cover up. So I'm a big fan of being direct because what they think about you is none of your business. Like I'll tell you a funny thing. Like this is what I dream about, right? Is going into an interview and having like a really nice suit on, and there's a glass of water on the table, and they say, "Hey, Eric, are you ready to start the interview?" And I say, "No, I'm not ready yet. I need to do something." And I take the water and I pour it on my head. And either one of two things would happen. They'd either be like, "You got our floor all wet. Get the hell out of here," or they'd be like, "Why did you do that?" And I'd say, "Oh, sorry. Let me explain. That's a reminder that I'm not here to look good for you, and I'm not here to please you. I'm here to serve you. So I made myself all wet just as a reminder and as a demonstration that I'm not here to please you, man. I'm not here to look good, lady, right? I'm here to serve." Now, they would either kick you out or they would hire you on the spot, and they would have a great story to tell about it. And look, if you don't want to pour water on your head, that's fine. But that's the kind of energy that you can bring. That's the kind of mindset. So that would be pretty direct. What about being old on the older side with great experience? I think it's fantastic. Those of you who are, and again, I'm no spring chicken myself, but I run into a lot of job seekers that are like, "I'm 55, I'm 60, I'm 65, I'm 70. What about my age?" And some of you have even received and adhered to the advice of, "Oh, take everything off of there that's more than 15 years old." You know who gives that advice? People who don't have more than 15 years experience often, right? Why would you do that? Is the stuff you learned 20, 25 years ago, like, did you forget it? Was it not formative to your career? Is it not part of your authentic story? So don't take that off, right? Don't make yourself small, right? If you find that you're sort of at a senior level in your career and you have a ton of experience, the answer is not to make yourself small. The answer is to aim higher, because they're almost certainly going to hire, if we have a choice between the overqualified person and the person who's just barely qualified, all other things being equal, they're going to hire the person who's just barely qualified. They have room to grow. They can pay them less, right? The overqualified person, like, they may not do the job we actually need them to do, and they're going to be gone in 5 minutes when they find a job that's actually at their level. So if you find that you're overqualified, you want to aim higher. And it's probably, those of you who are senior in your career, it's probably not through job boards. It's through your network. So if I was to go to your Google contacts and ask every single one of them, how many of you know that this person's on the job hunt? If very few of them say, "Oh yeah, I know what's going on, and I know what she did last week," that's a problem. It's also an opportunity. All right, great question, Mike. Oh, one more. Does it look good or bad if you apply for multiple jobs in the same company? So I'd say, first of all, what they think about us is none of our business. We're not trying to look good for anybody. And I think it's fantastic when somebody applies for more than one job at the same company, especially when I have clients that apply for a job and they get a no, and then they apply again, because nobody on the employer side likes giving a no. Like, nobody wakes up and is like, "Hey, I'm going to reject a bunch of people today," right? Unless they're sociopathic, in which case you don't want to work for them anyway. Nobody wakes up and says that, right? So I know, for at least in my experience, when I was hiring people and I had to say no to somebody who was very good, I didn't want to say no, but there was just one job. I had to pick somebody, and then they applied again. They went right to the top of the pile, because what they were doing is they were showing me that they were more committed to my organization and serving our cause than they were willing to risk getting rejected again, right? Showing more than telling. So I'm a big fan of that. All right, let's see other questions here. Okay, I'm looking through here. Thanks for sticking with us, guys. And again, if you have new questions, I'm going to hit the end of the scroll here in just a second. Right, so Mike, isn't AI filtering resumes? Yeah, we handled that one. Okay, let's see here. Any more questions? Here we go. What about getting jobs, but not the jobs that you want? Is that what you're saying? I'm not necessarily saying that, Mike. I'm saying you don't have to worry about whether you want the job unless and until it's offered. Because really, until it's offered, until you get a piece of paper, an email or something that explains the offer, you're sort of negotiating with yourself, right? Like there may be a job that you wouldn't want to do for 100,000, but if they offered you 300,000, you might want to do that job. That's the point I'm getting at. And it could be that, there's a job that before you know much about it, that you wouldn't want to do it. And if you close the door, you'll never have the opportunity to explore it. Whereas if you apply and you go for a couple of interviews and you get into it, you might figure out that it's a job you're actually really interested in. The opportunity here is to not know, is what I'm getting at. All right. Until you get an offer, and then you can decide what you want to do. But until then, it's premature. It's really understandable, but it's optional. So look, my friends, I'm going to put in the chat just one more time. Those of you who are wanting to book a call with me, and just to explore like what's possible for you, no strings attached. I talk to a lot of people. It's just part of my practice. And if having a conversation is something you'd like to do, I'd really welcome it. And those of you, so many of you stuck on here for so long, I really appreciate your valuable time. And I just want to be a voice for you that, if you've been working hard on this job search stuff, you're going to figure this out. You absolutely will. The only mystery here is time, right? And the reason to make an investment in working with a guy like me is just to reduce the time. Like you can figure this out on your own, and you will eventually, or you can get some help, and it's just going to get you a better result faster. And so that's the math to do, right? How much is it costing you every week that you're on the job search? And if it's not costing you anything, that's great. And I'm glad for that. But if it is, and you're looking for help, let's talk. And either way, I just want to be a voice of encouragement for you. I know being on the job search for a long time is not for the faint of heart. And you're going to figure this out. There are bright things on the horizon for you. And I just acknowledge you for all of it, my friends. So take care. It's been great. Great talking to you. I hope you have a great day, and keep your chin up because you're going to figure this out. Take care, guys.